Hey, what's up? So I recently watched the film Spiderhead, and I was kind of disappointed in it. Not that I had, big expectations going into it, but after kind of getting introduced to the main idea, I thought it was pretty intriguing, and I thought they could do some fun stuff with it, and then I thought it just kind of fell flat. Um, and so I want to look at why that kind of happened. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to look at the short story that this is based on, and then look at the things that they added and changed, and how I actually think a lot of those things weaken the story overall. So let's dive right into that. So I'm going to explain the short story up until close to the ending when things really start to change. But there are some changes throughout, and we'll get into those. So both our stories center around Jeff. Jeff is a convicted criminal, and in lieu of going to a normal penitentiary, he is basically working as a lab rat for pharmaceutical testing. And there's a couple of different drugs that they're testing. The first one that we get introduced to, and a lot of the tests have to do with, is a drug called N40. So what is N40? N40 is basically this drug that makes you feel love. It's the love drug, and they'll give it to two people, and they'll basically be getting down like Shaggy.
Saw me banging on the sofa. It wasn't me.
So he ends up having sex with two of the girls, and then he's later brought in to give another test to see if the N40 lasts, after the drug is out of your system, like if you still feel the love. And so he's asked to give these girls, one of them, Darkenflox, which Darkenflox is basically, to think of it, the easiest way, it's just like the Scarecrow stuff from Batman, it's just bad deal, fear and anxiety, just awful stuff. You don't want Darkenflox. So Jeff doesn't want to give Darkenflox either of these girls, kind of saying that would be random which one he chooses because he doesn't really feel that love for them anymore. That he used to, but he doesn't anymore. And Amnesty eventually kind of lets this day go, but then Jeff is back in the next day, and he's going to be giving the Darkenflox to Heather, the first girl. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's not a choice. They're going to give it to her, and they're going to, record his reaction. And before they do any of these tests, the person must first acknowledge it and give consent in order for them to give them the drug. And eventually, Amnesty is able to get Jeff to acknowledge it, and they give Heather the Darkenflox, and she dies. She completely dies. And this is where I'm actually going to stop, because I think this is where it starts to change quite a bit. So let's go back. So one of the first main changes in the movie is the introduction of this character, Lizzie. Lizzie is the main love interest in the story, and I don't really feel like she adds a lot to it, especially because for a lot of the beginning part, we get kind of jerked around with his dead girlfriend that we don't know is dead yet, but he makes phone calls to. It's a really weird thing, and it's really boring. I'd get into it more, but it's just boring. No. So in both the movie and in the short story, they, as I said, with Jeff having to pick between the two girls of the Darkenflox, Jeff ends up in a room with the guy Rogan when, kind of the same thing is happening from the other side. Except in the movie, Miles Teller has to have a whole freak out over possibly having gay sex.
No way, guys. Come on.
Just relax.
Which, yeah, if you're not wanting to have some gay sex, I can see why you would freak out about possibly having some gay sex. But his whole reasoning behind it is that they already know that the N40 would work, but that's not really true. We don't know that the N40 would, make you go against your sexual orientation. But yeah, either way, they don't actually end up, doing the dirty. Because, that's not what the test was. The test was asking with the girl which one of them they wanted Darkenflox, but neither of them get Darkenfloxed. Another big change to the story is Jeff's crime. In the short story, Jeff's crime is that he gets in a fight with somebody a couple years younger than him, and he's losing the fight, and he ends up grabbing a brick and just, killing the guy, which is pretty dark. I feel like that's pretty dark, and it's a pretty conflicted character, which I think is okay. I think you can make characters that are kind of shitty. You don't have to make your main character a good person. We just have to understand why they're making the decisions they're making. That's really what it comes down to. When I watch Better Call Saul, I'm not being oh yes, Saul is on the right side of all of this. No, I just understand why Saul is doing what he's doing. Breaking Bad's probably a better example. I don't know why I didn't use Walter White. That's a better example. We'll pretend I said Walter White. Now let's take a look at what Jeff Scram was in the movie. I've got to admit, it's pretty damn funny.
Cool to drive. Ice cold.
So as you saw, Jeff Scram in the movie is that he drives drunk and he kills a bunch of his friends. And he feels really bad about this, for sure. And it's really shitty, you know, and it's a dumb thing to do. Don't drink and drive. But it's a completely different thing. This is like a neglect thing, whereas that is like a violent crime where he murdered somebody. Like, he had to, like, make, like, there's still emotion stuff going on here for sure, you know, it's very heated. But, you know, he made the decision to grab the brick and do that. Obviously, he did make the decision to get in the car, but so did the people with him. Like, you know, you can make the argument that they also got in a fight. But they are getting in, you know, everybody's gotten in a fight. Most fights don't end with somebody grabbing a brick and smashing somebody's face in. A lot of the times when people drive around really drunk, especially when they're actively drinking, like they are in this scene, you may just end up crashing. And I'm not going to feel that bad for you or your dead friends when you do that. Like, if they had hit, like, an innocent family or something, oh yeah, that's way worse, because now you've got a party that had nothing to do with it who's suffering the consequences from it. But yeah, Jeff and his drunk friends, they were asking to drive drunk into a tree, and they drove drunk into a tree. Yeah, fucking sucks to suck, my dude. And now we'll come back into where the short story was, because now we're going to get introduced to another big change. After they kill the first girl, bring in another girl the next day, and Jeff is asked once again to, you know, give her the Darkenflox. And he's basically like, no, I'm not going to do it. And that's when we find out that they have this obedience drug that once they give it to him, they're just gonna do whatever they're asked. So Amnesty has to go and, like, get permission from the committee to use this drug on Jeff, which I think is a little silly. Like, they're already in here. I feel like just be able to use it on them. But, you know, whatever. He has to go and get permission for it. So while he goes to get permission for it, he's like, nah, dude, I'm not giving this girl Darkenflox. This is awful. This is not, you know, doing anything to improve my life or what I think of myself. So he notices the Amnesty left, like, the remote for it there, and so he goes onto it, and then he gives himself, like, a bunch of Darkenflox, and then throws the thing down a heating vent so that he can't get it if he changes his mind, which he, like, very quickly is like, yeah, bad idea. Once the Darkenflox starts hitting him, and he's, like, trying to reach down the heater to get it, but he can't, and he ends up killing himself against a table. So yeah, that's how that one ends, and then he kind of floats up, you know, into towards the heavens, you know, seeing all the different people in the facility, and he also sees his mom, who, like, he mentions being, like, really worried about him and stuff, and his mom doesn't even exist in the film. In the film, his mom is replaced with his dead girlfriend, which I think is weaker. Yeah, I think that's dumber. I'm just gonna say I think that's dumber. And the reason I think that's dumber is because, you know, it makes sense that you would have a relationship with your alive mom. It makes less sense that you would have a relationship with your dead girlfriend. Especially while you're really into this other girl already named Lizzie. So who even cares about her? Honestly, it's the whole Lizzie and the dead girlfriend, this whole romance part of it is just so dumb. I just hate it so much. So anyway, in the movie, the like, mind control, the, like, obedience drug is actually a twist that we find out, like, near the end, that one of the drugs they've been giving them this whole time is this drug that, you know, that makes them do as they're told. And I think this completely kind of ruins the movie, because, like, in the short story, it's something that, like, always exists. They know it exists, and once Jeff knows that's going to happen, he makes the choice to then sacrifice himself. He makes the choice, which I feel like is a really important thing, like the making of choices. Like, it's all about free will. That's, like, one of the biggest themes of this entire story. The biggest themes of the entire story are free will and self-forgiveness. And I feel like the short story does better with both of them. Because you have him make his sacrifice at the end, showing his free will, and then as he ascends to the heaven, he sees, like, all these people, and he kind of makes a bit of amends on his way up, you know, kind of forgiving himself. In the movie, after Heather has been killed, because it's basically the same up to this point, Amnesty finds out that Jeff is really into Lizzie, and he decides that he's going to use Lizzie as the next person to give Darkenflox to. And then that's kind of when we like, really get the big reveal on the mind control thing. Mind control. I keep calling it mind control. On the obedience drug. That's the whole point. That's really why all these tests have been taking place, is to see if people will go against, everything they believe in when given this obedience drug. This is what I kind of think is dumb, because they've had this B6 in them like the whole time, which means any decision that they've made up to this, like any of the acknowledged things, like they really haven't acknowledged because they've just been under the influence of this B6. But it gets dumber, because once we learn about the B6 is when amnesty is being given it, and there's kind of this this moment where Jeff. So when they're about to give Lizzie the Darkenflocks, it turns out that Jeff had been a sneaky snake, and he now has Amnesty's pack, because Absinthe has pack because he's been doing his own drugs, and he's given Darkenflocks and the B6 and all this kind of stuff, and that's when we have the revelation where, like, apparently B6 doesn't completely work. It won't work if you're told to destroy the one thing you love, which, kind of inferred is that that's Lizzie for Jeff. But with, Amnesty not listening to Jeff, we're getting told that the thing that Amnesty loves so much that he can, just completely go against the drug is his company, which I think is really dumb. I don't think there's anybody in the world who has, like, intimate love for a company, because you don't have that kind of love like you would for a relationship with a business. That's just not how it works. Anyway, after Jeff's giving him, like, all these drugs, Amnesty still ends up giving Lizzie a bunch of the Darkenflocks, and Jeff and Amnesty end up getting in a fight, and Amnesty's pack smashes, so all things are even going crazier than before. Eventually, Jeff is able to get him down. He goes, he saves Lizzie, they start running out of the thing. During this time, Amnesty gets back up, and he goes over the intercom, and he's trying to get everybody to, like, stop them from leaving, or else everybody's going to have to go back to their normal state penitentiary. And then after that, he gets up and he goes and gets in his plane and takes off and starts flying his plane, which I think is the dumbest thing in the world, too, because he's under the effect of all these drugs. Like, when we've seen, like, a person under just Darkenflocks, like, they can't do anything. Hell, them under, like, N40, they're, like, tripping balls and can hardly even do it. Like, he's at least had, experienced the N40. We've seen that, but there's no way he's, like, taking the Darkenflocks and, like, getting a heavy resistance to the Darkenflocks. There's no way that is happening. So he's somehow able to ignore all the effects of these drugs, and he's flying his plane, and then as Lizzie and Jeff are able to escape as well, he ends up crashing his plane into the mountain.
Jeff and Steve, not that different.
But kind of the reason why I think that the short story does a better job with the ending, even though it's fun to see Amnesty die, is that Jeff really makes that, self-sacrifice, and he really shown that he's changed as a character, even in such a short time that we've seen him, whereas when we have a full movie, I don't really feel like Jeff has changed that much. Like, I don't know, has he really become a better person? He's just kind of escaped, I'm glad he escaped the shitty situation, but I don't know that Jeff has improved at all. I don't feel like Jeff has changed from the beginning of the movie at all. And so at the very end of the movie, Jeff has a little monologue about, like, self-forgiveness, which, is still fitting in the movie, but I don't feel like they do a lot with the self-forgiveness. Like, there's a moment where Jeff comes clean about his crime, and, like, right after that, they just end up talking shit on everybody else in the facility for what they did. That doesn't really sound to me like somebody who's, like, really has felt bad for their crimes. So yeah, just overall, a lot of the decisions they made for, like, the core story, I just feel like weakened it. And it's kind of sad to see, because I felt like there was a lot of potential in the movie, and I felt like it could have been even better than the short story. But regardless, that's not what we got. We got a film that I think is worse than the short story. And to just kind of wrap things up, I just want to kind of go over some nitpicky things that I thought were funny about it, but, like, really aren't a big deal, but I still want to make fun of a little bit. So one of the things I love to nitpick is when Amnesty finds out that Lizzie and Jeff are, like, into each other, they kind of, like, have a jinx, and he's, like, gives him this cool look, and then he goes into the security footage, and Jeff has, like, this Etch-a-Sketch he's been using the whole time. Really hasn't been important for anything in the story, except this one instance now where Amnesty's looking onto the camera, and he sees Lizzie's drawn on the Etch-a-Sketch. I don't know why that cracks me up, but it definitely cracks me up. Another fun thing is the job that they are on is snack. Like, that's their job. They just make snacks and pass out snacks for people. That's a great job. I actually thought I had a few more nitpicky things, and I'm sure I did if I went through more of my notes. But actually, one more thing I realized I did want to mention is that the director for this movie is also the guy who just directed Maverick Top Gun. The writers for this movie have done the Deadpool movies, and they've also done like the first Zombieland. So neither this director nor this writer, I think, are bad. They've all done projects that have been better than this, and I feel like that's why I even want to hold them to that higher standard too, is because I know they can do better than what they did. The actors in this too, Miles Teller, Chris Hemsworth, both of them, I've seen them do better jobs in different movies. So it's just, I don't know, it's kind of sad to see them just kind of phone it in. And like, I don't know, maybe they would argue with me that they didn't phone it in, but it could have been great. Like, you had great source material to work with. And I feel like you just kind of squandered it. So I think that's about all I have to say on that. If you still want to go and see Spiderhead, it is on Netflix. But other than that, I will be seeing you guys in the next video.
Ice cold.